The ship moved slowly toward the massive station that floated in the darkness of space. Captain Park stood near the window and watched the lights of the Galactic Council headquarters grow brighter. She had been to this place many times before, but today felt different. Today was supposed to be the day everything changed. Beside her, Ambassador was fixing his formal coat. He was an old man now, with white hair and deep lines on his face. He had spent his entire life working for this moment. 43 years. That was how long Earth had been waiting. 43 years of being a provisional member of the Council. 43 years of proving themselves. "Are you nervous?" asked him quietly. Smiled, but his eyes looked tired. "I have dreamed of this day since I was a young man. Today, humanity finally gets its seat at the table." Wanted to believe him, she really did, but something felt wrong. She had seen the way the alien delegates looked at humans, like they were looking at insects. Useful insects, perhaps, but insects all the same. The docking procedure took 30 minutes. Then they walked through long white corridors filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some had scales, some had fur, some were made of crystal or light or things could not even describe. All of them moved aside when the human delegation passed, but none of them bowed, none of them showed respect. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of seats rose in circles around a central platform. Representatives from every major species sat in their designated areas, watching as walked to the speaking position, stood behind him with the rest of the human team. The head of the council was his body was made of living crystal, blue and cold and beautiful in a terrible way. His name was too complex for human tongues, so they simply called him the High Speaker. He looked down with eyes that reflected no warmth. "Ambassador," the High Speaker said, "you have come to request full membership for your species. The Council has reviewed Earth's application." Bowed his head respectfully. "We are grateful for the Council's consideration. Humanity has worked hard to prove our worth. We have shared our medical knowledge freely. Our doctors have cured plagues on 17 worlds. Our engineers built the communication network that connects this galaxy. Our soldiers have died as peacekeepers in wars we had no part in starting." "Yes," the High Speaker said, "your contributions have been noted." There was something in his voice that made stomach tighten. "However," the High Speaker continued, "the Council has concerns. Humanity is still young. Your species is barely 10,000 years old. You are emotional, unpredictable, volatile." He said the last word like it was poison. To grant full membership now would be premature. It would destabilize the established order. His face did not change, but saw his hands shake slightly. "What is the Council's decision?" "We recommend another century of provisional status. In 100 years, you may apply again." The chamber was silent. 100 years. Another 100 years of being treated like children. Another 100 years of giving everything and receiving nothing. Watched carefully, she saw something break inside him. Something that had been holding together for 43 years finally cracked. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "I understand," he said. "Then I must inform the Council that Earth withdraws its application, permanently." The silence in the chamber became something else, something shocked and confused. No species had ever withdrawn from the Council. It was unthinkable. The High Speaker's crystal body flickered with strange light. "Ambassador, perhaps you do not understand. Withdrawal would mean—" "I understand perfectly," said. His voice was still calm, but now it had an edge like a sharp knife. "For 43 years, humanity has given this Council everything. Our knowledge, our labor, our blood. And in return you have given us nothing but contempt." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate he could see. "You called us young, but we have grown old waiting for your approval. You called us volatile, but we have remained patient while you took everything we offered and gave nothing back. You called us unworthy, and perhaps we are, unworthy of this Council, unworthy of beings who take and never give." The high speaker rose from his seat. "Ambassador, you cannot simply—" "I can," said, "and I will. Effective immediately, Earth recalls all personnel from Council space. All humanitarian missions are canceled. All aid programs are terminated. The communication relays that we built and maintained will be transferred to Council control, but our technicians will no longer service them." "This is madness," someone shouted from the upper seats. Turned to look at the speaker. It was a delegate, a creature covered in soft gray fur. "You voted against us," said simply. "Every single species in this chamber voted against Earth today. You have made your choice. Now you will live with it." He turned and began to walk toward the exit, and the rest of the delegation followed him. Behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Some called for the humans to stop. Others demanded explanations. But the humans did not stop. They did not look back. In the corridor outside, caught up too. His face was pale and she could see tears forming in his old eyes, but he kept walking. "Sir," she said quietly, "that was necessary," he finished. "It was necessary, Captain. We have been their servants for too long. Today that ends." "What happens now?" "Stopped walking." He looked at her, and for a moment she saw not a tired old diplomat but a man who had finally found his purpose. "Now," he said, "we go home, and we let them discover what a galaxy without humans looks like." They walked back to their ship in silence. Behind them, the Galactic Council was still screaming. They had no idea that their greatest mistake had just begun. 3 years had passed since Earth turned its back on the galaxy. Admiral stood on the command deck of the defense station orbiting Mars. Through the massive windows, he could see dozens of warships moving in perfect formation. Human warships. They were not attacking anyone. They were simply watching, waiting, making sure nothing came in and nothing went out. Earth was closed. Behind him, the screens showed news from across human space. Colonies celebrating their independence. Factories building new ships. Schools teaching children about the years of service that had earned humanity nothing but rejection. The message was clear everywhere. We gave them everything and they spat in our faces. Never again. Lieutenant approached him with a— She was young, barely 25, and had never known a time when humans served the Council. To her, the old days were just history lessons. "Sir," she said, "we are receiving a distress signal from the cluster." Did not turn around. "What kind of distress?" "Colony ship. Their life support is failing. Engine damage from an asteroid collision." She paused. 12,000 passengers, sir. Mostly civilians, families, children." Closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the wars he had fought for the Council, the friends he had buried on alien worlds, the medals they had given him, always with words like provisional hero or valued ally attached to them. Never just hero, never just equal. "Not our concern," he said. "Sir." "They voted against us, Lieutenant." His voice was hard. "Every single species in that cluster voted to keep us as servants for another century. 12,000 lives. How many human lives did they dismiss when they told us we were not good enough?" His face was troubled. "I understand that, sir, but these are innocent people. They had nothing to do with the vote. Neither did the human soldiers who died defending their worlds." Finally turned to look at her. His eyes were cold but not cruel, just tired. Tired of caring for people who never cared back. 3 years ago we asked for one thing, just one: recognition, respect. They refused. They told us to wait another 100 years while they kept using our doctors, our engineers, our soldiers. He pointed at the distress signal on her. "Those people have a council. Let the council save them." The distress signal went unanswered. 2 days later, learned that the colony ship had been rescued by a passing merchant vessel. Only 600 people died before help arrived. She told herself that was better than 12,000. She tried to believe it. Far away from the defense perimeter, Dr. Han sat in a small laboratory inn. Rain fell against the windows as she studied samples of ocean microorganisms under her microscope. Simple work, quiet work, nothing like the years she had spent on Seven, running the galaxy's best xenobiology research station. She did not miss it. Well, that was not entirely true. She missed the work, the discovery, the excitement of finding something no one had ever seen before. But she did not miss the way her alien colleagues had treated her, the way they had taken her research and published it under their own names, the way they had smiled at her face and laughed at her behind her back. Humans are good at following instructions, one of them had said once, not knowing she could hear. Like trained animals, useful but not intelligent enough for real science. She had discovered 3 new species of microscopic life on Seven. She had developed a treatment for a disease that was killing millions, and they had called her a trained animal. Now she studied ocean bacteria. It was boring, it was simple, but it was hers. No one would take credit for her work anymore. No one would look at her like she was less than them. Her phone buzzed, a message from an old colleague on Seven, begging her to come back. The research station was falling apart without her. Please, the message said, we need you. Read the message twice, then she deleted it. Across human space, the withdrawal continued. The quantum communication relays that Earth had built began to fail one by one. Human technicians had maintained them for decades, but now they were gone. The aliens who took over did not understand the systems. They tried to fix problems and made them worse. Within 2 years, half the network was dead. Trade routes collapsed. Ships got lost in deep space without the relays to guide them. Emergency messages went unanswered because they never arrived. And the plagues returned. Human doctors had spent 40 years fighting diseases on alien worlds. They had developed vaccines, treatments, quarantine protocols. They had trained local medical staff and built hospitals and saved millions of lives. But now they were gone. The aliens they had trained forgot their lessons. The hospitals fell into disrepair. The vaccines ran out. On 17 worlds, diseases that had been contained for decades began to spread again. People died in numbers not seen for centuries. The galaxy was learning what it meant to live without humans. On Earth, life went on. People worked and laughed and raised their families. They built new cities and new ships. They explored their own solar system for the first time in decades, no longer forced to send their best and to serve alien masters. Children played in parks and asked their parents about the aliens they had seen in old pictures. Why did they not like us? The children would ask. And the parents would shake their heads and say, because they could not see our worth, but we know our worth now, and we will never forget it. In his office on Mars, Admiral received another distress signal. Another alien world begging for help. Another disaster that human hands could easily fix. He turned off the signal and looked out at the stars. You had your chance, he said to no one. You chose wrong. The silence continued. The Galactic Council chamber was no longer beautiful. The crystal walls were cracked. The lights flickered. Half the seats were empty because the delegates could not travel safely anymore. The communication network that connected the galaxy was broken, and without it, everything was falling apart. Counselor of the Hegemony watched the emergency session with growing horror. She was old by her species' standards, and she had seen many difficult times, but nothing like this, nothing even close. The High Speaker stood at the central platform, but his crystal body no longer glowed with cold light. It was dull now, gray. His people were starving. Their crystalline biology required special nutrients that only grew on certain planets. For decades, human agricultural scientists had synthesized these nutrients and delivered them across the galaxy. Now the scientists were gone. The supply lines were broken, and they were dying. 17 systems have gone dark, the High Speaker announced. His voice was weak. We have received no communication from them in 6 months. We do not know if anyone is still alive. Then send ships to investigate, someone shouted. With what fuel? The high speaker replied. The mining operations in the outer reach have collapsed. Human engineers maintain those facilities. Without them, production has stopped. Counselor remembered the vote 3 years ago. She remembered standing in this very chamber and watching as every delegate raised their hand against Earth. Every delegate except her. She had abstained. It was a small act of defiance, but it was all she could do. We were fools, she said quietly to herself. Arrogant fools. The delegate slammed his furry fist on his desk. We must demand that Earth return to service. This is their fault. They abandoned us. Could not stay silent anymore. Abandoned. She stood up, her old bones protesting. We rejected them. We told them they were not good enough. We used their doctors and their engineers and their soldiers for 43 years, and then we told them to wait another century for basic respect. They had a duty. They had no duty, his voice echoed through the broken chamber. We never gave them anything, not rights, not representation, not even acknowledgement. They gave us everything freely and we treated them like servants, like animals. And now you are surprised that they left. The chamber fell into angry murmurs. No one wanted to admit the truth. It was easier to blame the humans. Easier to pretend that Earth had betrayed them rather than face the reality that the Council had driven them away. Far from the Council headquarters on a small station in neutral space, received the Council's official request for humanitarian assistance. He read it 3 times, his face showing no emotion. Was a young man, but he looked older than his 30 years. He had been a junior cultural when Earth. Now he was the only human presence remaining outside Sol's system. His job was simple: observe and report, nothing more. The ambassador sat across from him, wringing his furry hands nervously. Please, mister, we are dying. The plagues have returned. Our hospitals are empty. We need human doctors. I will relay your message to Earth, said calmly. How long will that take? Smiled thinly. Last month, Earth's parliament voted to classify the Galactic Council as a hostile foreign entity. Any official communication must go through 17 levels of security review. I would estimate 8 to 10 months for a preliminary response. The ambassador's eyes went wide. 8 months, people are dying now, thousands every day. Yes, agreed. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but his eyes were not. They are, that is very sad. You cannot be so cruel. This is genocide by neglect. Leaned forward slightly. Do you remember what you said 3 years ago, Ambassador, when my people asked for recognition? You said, and I quote, humans are useful tools, but tools do not deserve seats at the table. Do you remember that? The ambassador said nothing. His fur had gone pale. I remember, continued. I was in the observation gallery that day. I heard every word, every insult, every laugh. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. You called us tools. Well, tools do not have feelings. Tools do not care when they are put away in a drawer and forgotten. But we are not tools, Ambassador. We are people, and people remember. Please. I will send your request. Turned back to face him. But I suggest you do not wait for an answer. Find another solution, because Earth is not coming to save you, not anymore. The ambassador left the station an hour later, watched his ship disappear into the darkness and felt nothing. He had learned to feel nothing. It was easier that way. Back on the council station, the emergency session had become a disaster. Delegates were screaming at each other. The accused thee of hoarding resources. The accused thee of blocking trade routes. Everyone blamed everyone else for the collapse that was happening all around them. Only Counselor remained calm. She sat in her seat and watched the chaos with sad eyes. She had tried to warn them. 3 years ago, when the vote happened, she had spoken privately to the High Speaker. She had told him that rejecting Earth was a mistake, that humanity's contributions were too important to dismiss, that pushing them away would lead to disaster. He had laughed at her. "What can they do?" he had said. "Leave. Where would they go? They need us more than we need them." He was not laughing now. Looked at her. A secret message had arrived an hour ago, encrypted with a code that only she knew. It was from Earth, from a human diplomat who remembered that she had abstained from the vote. The message was short. "We have not forgotten who stood silent when others condemned us. When you are ready to talk, we will listen." She read it again and again. Then she deleted it and sat back in her chair. Perhaps there was still hope. Perhaps Earth would help those who deserved help, even if they refused to help those who did not. She looked around the broken chamber, at the dying council, at the arrogant fools who still did not understand what they had done. The collapse had only just begun, and she knew it would get much worse before it got better. General had spent her entire military career fighting other species' wars. She had been 17 when she first put on a uniform, full of pride and hope, believing that serving the council would earn humanity respect. By 25, she had learned the truth. By 30, she had stopped hopping. By 40, she had stopped caring. Now she was 52 years old, standing on the bridge of the battleship New Seoul, and she was finally fighting for something that mattered. Her fleet consisted of 47 ships, not the largest force in the galaxy, but perhaps the most advanced. While other species had relied on human engineers to build and maintain their vessels, Earth had been developing its own technology in secret. Ships that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than anything the Council had ever seen. "General," her aide said, "we are approaching the border." Nodded the Councilor's people. They had not voted against Earth, they had abstained. It was not much, but it was something. And President Shin had made Earth's new policy very clear. Those who showed respect would receive it in return. "Status of the fleet?" she asked. 12 heavy cruisers and 30 support vessels. They are moving toward the colony on Threshold 4. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Knew what would happen if they reached that colony. The crystalline species was desperate. Their people were starving and they had decided to take what they needed by force. They had food, medicine, and resources. They had ships and desperation. It was a recipe for massacre. "Set course for Threshold 4, ordered. Maximum speed." The New Seoul and its fleet cut through space like a blade. Human ships had always been fast, but these new engines were something else entirely. What would have taken other ships 2 days took them 8 hours. They arrived at Threshold 4 just as the fleet was taking position around the planet. Could see the colony on the surface, cities filled with millions of innocent who had done nothing wrong except live on a world that others wanted. "Open a channel to the commander," she said. The screen flickered and a face appeared. Even through the transmission could see that his crystal body was dull and cracked. Starvation was killing his people slowly. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Human vessel," the commander said. "You have no authority here. This is Council space. Leave immediately." "The Council rejected Earth," replied calmly. "We rejected the Council in return. Your authority means nothing to us." "Then why are you here?" Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They are our friends. They stood for us when others condemned us. Perhaps they did not speak loudly, but they did not join in the hatred, and humans remember who treated them with basic decency. You would fight for them, die for them." "If necessary, but I do not think it will be necessary," leaned forward slightly. "You have 12 heavy cruisers. I have 47 ships that are faster, better armed and crewed by people who have spent decades learning how to fight. We fought your wars for you, Commander. We know your tactics, your weaknesses, your blind spots. Do you really want to find out how good we have become?" The commander was silent for a long moment. His crystal face showed no expression, but knew he was afraid. She had seen that fear before, on the faces of enemies who realized too late that they had underestimated humanity. "This is not over," he said finally. "No," agreed. "It is not. But today you will leave this system and these people will live. What happens tomorrow depends on the choices you make." The transmission ended. 10 minutes later, the fleet began to withdraw. Watched them go, her face expressionless. Behind her, her crew cheered. On the surface of Threshold 4, they looked up at the sky and saw human ships standing between them and death. Many of them cried. Some knelt in prayer. A few just stared in disbelief. 3 days later, Counselor arrived at the colony to meet General in person. They sat in a small room overlooking the city, drinking tea that they had prepared specially for the occasion. "I never expected this," admitted. "When Earth, I thought we had lost them forever." Set down her cup. "You almost did, but President Shin believes in something called selective loyalty. Help those who deserve help, protect those who showed us respect, and let the others face the consequences of their choices." "The others are dying." "Yes." "Does that not trouble you?" Considered the question carefully. "It troubles me that I feel nothing when I think about it. I used to care so much. I used to believe that compassion should have no limits, but then I buried my brother on Prime. He died defending a people who would not even let him eat in the same building as them. He was a hero, and they treated his body like garbage." She looked out at the city below. "The Council had 43 years to treat us like equals. They chose not to. Now they are learning what life looks like without us. That is not cruelty, Counselor. That is simply consequences." Was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I understand, and for what it is worth, I am sorry. Sorry that we did not speak louder when we had the chance." "You spoke when it mattered," said. "That is why we are here." In the weeks that followed, more human ships arrived at space. Engineers came to repair infrastructure. Doctors came to treat the sick. Teachers came to train local workers. It was everything the Council had once received freely, but now it was given only to those who had earned it. And across the galaxy, other species began to notice. The who had voted against Earth but regretted it. The who had spoken privately against the rejection. The who had tried to change the vote at the last moment. One by one, they reached out to Earth with apologies and requests for reconciliation. Some were accepted, some were rejected. Humanity was no longer offering unconditional help. Every relationship had to be earned. The reckoning had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. 5 years had passed since the rejection. The galaxy looked very different now. Ambassador Park stood at the window of New Geneva Station, watching ships move through the darkness outside. Human ships flew alongside vessels. Transports docked at platforms built by joint engineering teams. A medical frigate was leaving for the outer colonies, staffed by doctors from 7 different species working together as equals. This was the Compact of Equals. 17 species who had chosen humanity not as servants but as partners. No provisional memberships. No century-long trials, no tests of worthiness, just mutual respect, freely given and freely received. Touched the window gently. Her reflection looked back at her, older now, gray touching her temples, lines around her eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. She had been a captain when this all started. Now she was one of the most respected diplomats in human history. The woman who had witnessed the rejection and helped build something better from the ashes. Behind her, the assembly hall was filling with delegates. Today was the first official meeting of the Compact's governing council, a historic moment, the beginning of a new era. Ambassador Park, a young aide, approached her. "It is almost time." Nodded and turned away from the window. As she walked toward the assembly hall, she passed a small observation room. Inside, sitting alone in a wheelchair, was Old. She stopped and entered the room. "Ambassador, you should be in the hall. This is your day as much as anyone's." Smiled weakly. Age had caught up with him in the past 5 years. His body was failing, but his mind remained sharp. "I am an old man, my time has passed. This is your day now, yours and everyone who will come after. None of this would have happened without you. without what you did in that council chamber. I just said what needed to be said. He looked out at the stars. I spent my whole life asking the galaxy to recognize our worth. In the end, I realized that we did not need their recognition. We needed to recognize ourselves. Knelt beside his chair and took his old hand in hers. Thank you for everything. Squeezed her hand gently. Go make history, I will be watching. The assembly hall was magnificent. It had been designed by architects from 12 different species, blending styles and traditions into something entirely new. The seats were arranged in a circle, with no position higher or lower than any other. At the center was not a throne or a podium, but a simple table where representatives could meet as equals. Walked to her position and looked around at the gathered delegates. She recognized many faces. Counselor of the, who had risked everything to reach out to Earth. Ambassador, whose people had been among the first to apologize for the rejection. Captain, a military leader who had refused to fire on human ships during the early days of withdrawal. These were not perfect beings. They had made mistakes. Some had even participated in the mistreatment of humans before the rejection. But they had learned. They had changed. They had earned their place here through actions, not words. Friends, began. 5 years ago, humanity asked a simple question. Are we worthy of respect? The Galactic Council answered no. They told us to wait another century while they continued to use our knowledge, our labor, and our lives. She paused, letting the words sink in. We could have accepted that answer. We could have bowed our heads and continued serving masters who saw us as tools. But we chose a different path. We chose to leave. And in doing so, we learned something important about ourselves. Looked around the circle, meeting every pair of eyes she could see. We learned that our worth does not depend on others' recognition. We are valuable because of who we are, not because of what others say about us. And we learned that true friendship cannot be earned through submission. It must be built on mutual respect. She gestured at the gathered delegates. Every species in this room has demonstrated that respect. Some of you abstained from the vote against us. Some of you spoke privately against the rejection. Some of you apologized and asked for a chance to do better. All of you have proven through your actions that you see us as equals. That is why we are here. Not to create a new council, not to build another system of masters and servants, but to form a compact of equals, a partnership where every species has the same rights, the same responsibilities, and the same voice. Stood up slowly, her old bones protesting. I would like to say something if I may. Nodded and stepped aside. The counselor looked around the room with sad, wise eyes. Many years ago, I watched the council make its greatest mistake. I watched beings I respected treat humanity with contempt, and I said nothing. I abstained from the vote, but I did not fight. I did not speak. I was a coward. She bowed her head slightly. I cannot undo what was done, but I can make a promise here today before all of you. That we'll never again be silent when injustice is done. We will speak, even when it is dangerous. We will stand even when we are afraid. That is what humanity taught us, not through words but through example. One by one, other delegates rose and made similar promises. They spoke of lessons learned, mistakes acknowledged, and a commitment to something better. When the speeches were finished, returned to the center of the room. Then let it be recorded. On this day, the compact of equals is born. 17 species, bound not by force or necessity, but by choice. May this be the beginning of something the galaxy has never seen before. Outside the station, a transmission went out across the stars. It reached human colonies and worlds and stations. It reached the broken remains of the Galactic Council, where desperate delegates still argued about who was to blame for their collapse. And it reached where a dying species finally understood the price of arrogance. Returned to the observation room after the ceremony. Was still there, looking out at the stars. It is done, she said. No, shook his head gently. It is just beginning, but it is a good beginning. He reached out and touched her arm. "I can rest now, knowing that what we built will survive." Stood beside him, watching the ships outside. Human vessels flew alongside those of their new allies. Somewhere out there, joint research stations were making discoveries that would have been impossible alone. Colonies were growing, trade was flowing, lives were being saved. And far away, on the dying worlds of those who had rejected Earth, the greatest mistake the galaxy ever made continued to exact its price. The humans had turned their backs. They were not coming back. But they had found something better, something built on respect instead of submission, something earned instead of demanded. And that was enough.